everybody, it's me, Booga, once again. So, today I wanted to talk about something that kind of made me mad. I didn't know what. Something good to get into, you know? After a while, I came up with one thing, but I'm gonna hold that off for a while because there's a lot of bias around it, and all the sources I keep finding are all bad. So we're gonna hold off on that one. Today we're gonna be talking about something I call political spectrum disorder. I'm gonna get into it, but that's a quick overview. So there are people who can't put themselves anywhere politically, and that's not just for themselves. That's for other people. That's for in general, where they can't really define it. And everybody's definition looks different. So one thing that makes me think about this is labels. Labels, and this is specifically for American politics, but for labels, we often say, oh, this person's a fascist, or oh, this person's a communist, or oh, this person's whatever, right? Let's be honest, there's not a lot of fascists and communists. Now, I'm not saying they don't exist, they definitely do. But what I'm trying to say here is you're taking general conservatives and liberals and painting them as the most radical of the wing. So we really have to get into what is what and how we define that and how I think it should be defined. And there's some people again who want to change this, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So first things first, I think to get down, we should define what right wing and left wing is. Right wing is somebody who is economically believes in free trade, free markets, capitalism, laissez-faire. Both that economically and socially right. Limitations on homosexuality, on abortion, transgender, other social issues that push back against this, and for more education independence. And this is in the United States. This does not go for every country. Again, because that's all that matters. We are the only country that matters. Sorry. On the left, however, is somebody who is more protectionist, more anti-laissez-faire markets, more government interference in the markets, more government interference overall, supporting heavy induction of left-wing values in the society socially, which are pretty much the opposite of right-wing. Representation of minorities, people who are diverse in their lifestyles, like transgender, homosexual, and people like that. That's the social left and economic left. That's left wing. Now, there are people who are economically left and socially right, people who are socially left and economically right. But for the most part, people usually stay in those two bricks. Somebody in between that would be a centrist, and someone to the most radical extremes of both would be a bunch of different titles, and we don't really have to get into every single thing, but I really want to map out some way we can define a political compass today for the modern 21st century. And then I want to go through and kind of define where we can put that. We're going to throw out the old political spectrum and have to figure out a way where we can say which side of politics is more authoritarian and which side is more libertarian, so we can just throw it onto one wing. I'm going to say that the left wing is more authoritarian. So we're going to have this parallelogram shape on the screen. I don't know how you would describe it. Alright, so after coming to what we want to do here, I have a bit of a compass and how I kind of want it to look. So let's kind of map this out a bit. Okay, so in the top here we have left slash off. And in the bottom, copy this and paste this actually. We have right slash libertarian. Okay, so on the spectrum, most people are going, so like, for example, this is where the divide is right here. This is like the center, I guess you could say. The main divides are no longer left is no longer authoritarian and libertarian. So we need to find a way to reorganize how we kind of categorize this, right? I'm gonna put this up here so you can see it better. But anyways, so we have this here. What we want to figure out is what's kind of dividing people today. What a major issue is. I think one of the major issues dividing people today, the same issues that have kind of plagued people forever. So you have religion, race, those kind of things, politics. However, we have politics to describe here. Now, I don't think that's the route we should go down, but we have to kind of think of the drawing board here. What is majorly dividing debates today? A lot of people might say it's people who want to move more tech and people who want to be more based. But I feel like that's kind of implied in the left-right kind of thing. So that's like its own issue that's like jumping across the line. So you have like people like Peter Thiel who you can obviously say, okay, yeah, that guy's right-wing. The problem is he has that left-wing characteristic where he'll say, yeah, I want technological advance. Now, I think technological advance is its own kind of thing. So there needs to be something else that is causing this major divide politically. And I think I have the answer, at least for this one today. And then we can always come back on it in a later video and update this in whatever way we want. But I think personally right now, what the major thing that's dividing is focus. What are people's main goals? That's the whole point of politics, is to figure out what goals of people are and how it is achieved that. Now, most people in America want the same things. Just strong economy, national standing, overall cohesion, and whatnot. Things like that. Now, it's the way to get about that people are kind of geared up about. But another thing is the way people should live their lives and what the focuses people have on their lives. So there are people who have certain focuses that are different. There are two major things that are causing this divide in focus. I think one thing that's a divide is the domestic divide in America and the more global. So what do I mean by this? But basically, domestic, it's more like at home. You know, we have homeless people. We don't have free healthcare. We don't have all these things. We have protests. We have whatever. And then globally, we have Iran, we have Israel, we have the EU, we have whatever, right? And so people are getting more divided between these two things, I think, more and more. I'm seeing this divide more each day. And if you want to say that there's another thing that you think is dividing people more, go right ahead and say it down in the comments. But we can always come back and fix this for later dates. But this is the first, kind of idea I want to get down on paper of this. So one thing I want to get straight is this is the line between the domestic and global. Okay, I think I know how to get this to work, kind of. So in the traditional political spectrum, 4 boxes, but they're very slimmed out. I need to figure out a way how this would exactly be, but let's try and knock this out a bit, right? And this is the best way to put it. A lot of people who are good at geometry are bad at algebra. Like me, I'm good at algebra, but I'm bad at geometry. So, because that's the reason why is because they're two very different subjects. While they're both math, yes, one has to deal in reality, like buildings, and that sort of thing. And the other is more theoretical, like more like playing with the mind. Politics is kind of like algebra more. Like you're playing this fundamental kind of abstract thought, and it's more like algebra. Like, okay, we don't know the answer. How do we solve this? How we have to find a way to solve this. Geometry is more like, okay, I can't figure out how to make my toaster work, right? In other words, we're trying to figure out how to define something that's algebraic in a way that's geometric. We have to get on the spectrum here. So we have our domestic people, our global people, our left auth, and our right lib. So, obviously, there are going to be people who are, auth-right, lib-left, so there's obviously some nuance here, but the way we can map this out is, I think, a lot more fitting to the modern day in a way that we can kind of understand more. I think your grande average liberal, let's say. Let's start with that. The definitions between liberal and conservative. So we have liberal. So liberals are going to be like here-ish. Let's put it there for the sake of this video. We can redefine this as we go along. But I want to say conservatives are kind of along this line too. I don't know where to divide the line here, where you can say whatever, you're exactly, what I'm trying to say. So let's color code this. So to color code, I think for the Republican Party, red and blue and that kind of thing. So obviously you have regular liberals, regular conservatives. This is kind of where they would be on this hypothetical political spectrum here. This is hard to define, and again, We're getting there. These are more. Blue is gonna be for left wing ideologies, and red is gonna be for right wing ideologies. Obviously, right? Okay. So for the left authoritarian, I think in the most general sense, let's explore the left wing first. How about that? So I want to start with leftists. So if you're leftist, you're more left wings. You're going to be more this way. You're going to be more authoritarian, and you're going to be. I think you're going to be a bit more global. So it'd kind of be like this in a sense. I think this is kind of the zone. I want actually. You know what I want to do? I want to put like circles, like kind of just show where like the boundaries are of like exactly what it is. I think where we can say like, oh yeah, this is like the rule. We kind of say like this would generally be a circle here. Or like they can be more global but can be more domestic, and they're kind of in this zone. A leftist is probably going to be more towards the global end, but they can also have some domestic leanings. They're definitely more authoritarian, so they're going to be more like this too. Okay, does that make sense for everybody? Democratic socialism, I think that's one that we should probably talk about. So Demsoc. So they're kind of a new faction in America, mostly to people not really understanding. So for people who don't know what like democratic socialism, it's socialism, but you want to be democratic, kind of not democratic, but like you're socialist, but you want to achieve socialism by a democratic means. So that is the historic name for the ideology, and again, it might be a bit different, but that the people who are calling themselves that, we don't know enough about like where exactly we are with that today. So I think saying they're related to the historical meaning of it is probably the best way we can put it. So they are going to have more of a domestic leaning, so like this, but they're going to be more, at the top, more or less, with like the the left slash authoritarian kind of feel to it is just old school socialism slash communism. So SOCOMs, as we'll call it, SOCOMs. That's what we call them. Kind of differentiate for normies. So they would be the most in this section, obviously, but we need to find a way to where they would balance more in the domestic or more in the global. So, because they can't be fully in this wing, because then they would just be completely neutral in the. Actually, you know what? I think they would be, to be honest. So that would work. So we can kind of put them there. I think this is how we should kind of define it more, where we can kind of put it in this little corner where it like kind of relates to the Dem Sox, but it kind of can like be close to the left. But it's not really, and it's kind of its own independent thing that's like old school, whatever. So another thing in opposition to the Dem Sox or Dem Soap or Social Democrats, which is more like your European countries like Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Germany, like those kind of countries. I think they have more of a domestic kind of leaning, but they're have that kind of left whatever. They're still definitely liberal though, I think, in my opinion. Even though they have the kind of mindset where they have more socialistic welfare, you can't really say they're part of the Dem. So you don't call them the same, because that's like calling a Balkan person any other ethnicity than what they actually are. So obviously this is where we are. We can't really map out who's where and what this section right here we can't see just yet is, or where this would be, what a global left would look like, because it's so hard to define with this political spectrum disorder that we have. But even being able to kind of define this out today is the general conservative kind of encompass like a good, I want to say, between from the global to like the your average conservative is definitely split between the two. I don't think they really have a leaning in terms of like you get what I'm trying to say, right? Like there's no leaning domestic and global. There are people who are conservative who are more globalist, and people who are more domestic. Again, neocon, paleocon, that kind of thing. So actually, you know what? So we're not gonna do it. I think the paleocons are definitely more domestic, so they're more in this triangular shape up here, but they definitely have more of a right wing. So I wouldn't really ignore where they're like kind of in the left there, as I'm trying to put it. It's hard, okay, to make this. Your George Bush, people, your Ronald Reagans, whatever, you know, paleo neocon. If you don't know the difference between paleo neocons, I can't really describe it in this video, but it's pretty simple, old school conservative based stuff. So another thing I want to put in is over in the corner where we're gonna have probably the most radical wing of this is libertarians in the American spectrum, at least, where this is kind of where I'm getting my most kind of bias for this is libertarians, because they're such a big part of the Republican Party today. They kind of have that influence on right-wing politics where they can kind of give that libertarian squeal to it. They're not their main. They can kind of blend a little. I don't really want to put them like to where it like looks like they're more global, because they're a bit split on that too, I think. But just to add that nuance, I kind of think. All right. So another thing that we need to add if we're going to talk about right-wing politics is MAGA and AF. More of an I want to put them more to like to show they have more of an authoritarian appeal to them. So we can do this kind of, I think, like this. This is MAGA. As much as I can kind of try to kind of get it. The more right wing but more authoritarian kind of deal. So I would put them kind of in this spectrum, kind of. Yes, and there's definitely more of a domestic kind of feel to them. So that's why I kind of say it like that. This is kind of how I want to define it today, as like, oh yeah, this is where you would say, or I would say people are. I'm going to have this saved here so we can always come back to this for like a reference for myself, for you, anybody you want to take a screenshot, kind of understand this. This is kind of American politics, so the best way I can kind of describe this in the proper sense. I know it's not perfect, it's not the most visually appealing thing, and again, we can always fix it later, and whatnot. One more thing, actually, before I get into that. The Patriot Front. Now, a lot of people might get mad at me for adding it in because they're like a bunch of nobodies. Everyone's forgot about them. To not show partiality in this video, I want to add them to show, like, yes, there are radical factions within the right, just like in the left, not to, like, overblow on the right. They're having, I've been seeing them a bit more, and that's probably the best way I can kind of show, like, what a American fascism kind of looks like. It's more chauvinist in a sense, but I would say at the end of the day, it's more domestic. It's definitely very right-wing, but it's also more authoritarian. It's very different, and this is hard, again, to map out. And on the original political spectrum, kind of have a misunderstanding of the political spectrum as a whole. So I want to just take a screenshot, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're done. So, people getting this messed up. So, a lot of people are silly, right? And again, this could be ignorance, this could be a lack of understanding, this could be whatever, but a lot of people will say, the general paleocons are like fascist, like the Patriot Front. But obviously, we put them in different groups. They're not the same. Or someone will say a liberal is a leftist or communist, but we can obviously see there's so much different between them. And again, this is kind of hard to define, but the more we break it down by issue, the more I think people can kind of see the nuance more. So we need a new way to kind of design this spectrum. There needs to be more terminology. And I think one thing, again, major thing of why this happens is a lack of is the level of education in the United States. Not the lack of it. There's definitely education in the United States, but it's very biased, number one. Number two, there's the education on politics is very little. And I want to show, like not as to bias on this, I think schools are kind of scared to tackle the subject, number one. But number two, I think because there's no curriculum to teach it. There's no politics class in public school in America. In Europe, so for Europeans watching this, that might sound completely insane if you've never heard that before. And to Americans, you might be confused that that's a normal thing. A lot of people have that so they can kind of understand these kind of minute details and whatnot. In 8th grade, in English, we were doing a unit on the Holocaust. Now, again, I love history so much and whatnot. We were reading Anne Frank's diary and all that. But people, like the way it was taught, for most people, were getting so confused. For me, it was no problem because I knew everything. of course, because I'm a weirdo. But for everyone else, they were so confused because they couldn't really navigate the topic. They simplify it to, oh, Nazis just came in and took over everything and they defeated Germany and then they just hated Jews. But that's not really how it was, why it was. The same problem in Germany is the same problem we face today. This is the number one thing. We need to educate people. And I think that's the number one thing. We need education on this topic yesterday because people are radicalizing fast. And they have no way to understand it, the subject practically. The foot down, we just kind of have to say, hey, you need a certain understanding to be involved in this because we can't have everybody coming into vote. And yes, everyone should have the right to vote. Where we have this liberty endowed of the pursuit of happiness, but not everybody deserves the right to vote because they don't. Number one, they don't understand, but number two, they don't have the capabilities to understand. Number three, it's just not their thing. I think I've gone on long enough about this. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, share. Stay tuned, whatever. I just want to put a conclusion here at the end. This is a very sensitive topic, I think, for a lot of people, but I think what we need to understand is your next door neighbor is not a fascist. Your next door neighbor is not a communist. Your next door neighbor is not whatever. They're a normal person. They're living their life. And yes, they have different beliefs. And yes, they could be more radical than you might think. But at the end of the day, they're a human being and they're not something you can. Like, people are taking this as objects. People are being objectified. That's another thing. Is because we're stepping away from religion. That's a major point. People are becoming more objects of politics and not people that make up the ideals. And so ideals are becoming more fake, more objects, not personal. So not to scare away, because that's one thing that's causing this divide too, is people are scared to discuss this with people and they kind of view their political adversaries as crazy people. Because they never talk to them. They just go online and it's just a back and forth of straw manning. Never ending. Forever and ever. Anyways, as I said, thank you for watching. Main takeaway. Go talk to them. Don't be scared to talk about it. Just do. Try and understand. Stop trying to be, I'm right and I need to argue to be right. Argue to understand. Fight to have a comprehension of an ideal. Not just the whatever, right? So, thank you all for watching. Subscribe, like, share, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Alright, I will see you in the next one. I gotta go. Peace.